Tonverk is a highly capable sampler. Using input AB or USB, it can sample mono or stereo audio from a wide range of external sources, including synthesizers, computers, and mobile devices. It can also sample audio internally from the Tonverk itself. There are two sampling modes, recorder and auto-sampler. We will sample this synth app in this video using both modes. I have already connected my phone to Tonverk's USB port with a USB-C to USB-C cable. To access the sampling menu, press Sampling and use up and down to select either the recorder or the auto-sampler. Let's begin with the recorder. The recorder offers Elektron's familiar sampling features with a much longer recording time of 6 minutes. From this page, we can control various aspects of sampling using these knobs. First, let's select the input source using knob G. For sampling internally, we can use main, which is the mix track, track 1 to 8, and bus 1 to 4. Then, for sampling from input AB or USB, we can select either in A plus USB L or in B plus USB R for capturing a mono input, and in plus USB for capturing a stereo input. Tonverk will be listening to both in AB and USB at the same time, and it will sample from where the input source is connected. In my case, I'll use in plus USB. Now, if I play the keys on my phone, I can see the signals coming to the recorder on this meter. This patch plays an arpeggio if I hold the key, so let's try to capture a loop. The pattern's BPM is 120, so I need to make sure this app is also running at the same BPM. Next, be sure to set a healthy level at your source. For this app, I can adjust the volume knob to do that. So it's loud but not clipping. With regards to monitoring, I'm hearing the app through the mix track right now. That's because on the source page of the mix track, the levels for input AB are turned up. If I had these turned down, I will no longer be able to hear the input source. So on the sampling page, I need to turn up the monitoring level. Next, let's set the sampling length using knob E. The values here are shown in sequencer steps at the current BPM. For example, 1/16 means the recorder will capture 1 step, 1/4 captures 4 steps, 1/1 captures 16 steps, and 2/1 captures 32 steps, and so on. If it's set to max, sampling will continue up to 6 minutes and 6 seconds or until you manually stop sampling. Note that this buffer is always available even if the project's RAM is fully used. I'll set this to 1/1, in other words, 16 steps. We can now start recording immediately by pressing Function and Yes, or arm the recorder instead by pressing Yes. This way, recording will start as soon as the input signal exceeds the threshold, which is indicated by this line on the meter. Arming the recorder is useful because it will let us capture the audio right from its beginning. So let's try this. Using knob F, let's set the threshold just above the background noise and play the sequence. Sampling immediately started after the sound came in and stopped automatically after capturing 16 steps measured at 120 BPM. Let's preview the sound by pressing Function and Yes. Press left to turn on the loop during preview. We can hear it looping, and it seems like it successfully captured a perfect loop at 120 BPM, which is very easy with armed recording and a set recording length. To trim the sample, use the knobs in the top row. Use A and B to set the start and end, and use C and D to adjust the view. Press Yes once you're ready to trim, but I'm just going to go ahead without trimming. In addition, if your sample is too quiet, you can press up to normalize the sample. I'll press Yes now, and it's time to name the sample. I'll name it ARP1. Once I press Yes, Tonverk asks me if I want to assign this sample to a track. I'll select track 1, and it is now loaded. Note that you can only assign the sample to the single player machine. The sample will be stored in the SD card in the user folder and in the recordings folder, so you can always load it to your project later. Alright, that was a detailed look at the recorder. Now let's move on to the auto sampler that complements Tonverk's multiplayer machine. I'll go back to the recorder, hold Function and press No to delete this sample, and press left to select the auto sampler. The auto sampler makes it effortless to create our own multi-sampled instruments. It helps us sample from external MIDI-equipped devices, including hardware and software synths, by automating the sampling process. We will sample the same app on my phone, but I have selected a different monophonic patch. I can only play one note at a time, as you can see. Once we finish sampling, we will be able to play this sound polyphonically on Tonverk. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we adjust the sampling settings, the first step is to establish a MIDI and audio connection between Tonverk and the instrument you want to sample. For sampling from this phone, the USB cable handles both MIDI and audio. This is also the case for sampling a software instrument in a DAW, for example. For sampling a hardware synth, connect a MIDI cable from Tonverk's MIDI out to the MIDI in of the instrument you want to sample and connect the outputs of the instrument to input AB. We can now look at the settings. First, set the sampling source. We'll use in plus USB again. Next, select the MIDI channel. Make sure the channel you set here is used as the MIDI input channel on your instrument. For example, in this app, I can go to Settings and set MIDI channel to 1. Then, press Yes to play a test note. You should hear a sound if the connection is successful. At the same time, the auto sampler measures the latency and release time of the sound, automatically adjusting the settings here. This is very helpful, but you can also manually adjust them if you want to. Let's go ahead and press right to go to the second settings page. On the left, we can set the sampling range. Start is the lowest note where sampling starts, and end is the highest note where sampling ends. On the right, we can set the interval between the sampled notes. In other words, how frequently the auto sampler will sample. And set how many velocity layers to create. If both parameters were set to 3, for example, that means every third semitone would be sampled and each note for 3 times at a different velocity. Now, all of these parameters depend on your preference and sound source. For example, to replicate a complex, realistic-sounding instrument like a piano, ideally you would want to sample as frequently as possible with lots of velocity layers and for a wide range. This will minimize the amount of time stretching when the samples are spread out and playback. For a digital instrument, there might be much less detail to capture, and you might also want to keep the file size small. So I encourage you to experiment and tailor the settings to your liking, depending on what you are sampling. Now, I've set my preference for sampling this sound, so I'm going to press right again. This is the last settings page. Note duration sets how long each note is held during sampling. I'll stick to 1 second. Notice on the screen, the auto sampler gives me an estimated time for sampling and file size based on my settings, which is very useful. I don't have an issue with these numbers, so I'll go ahead and start sampling. This process won't take long, but I'll step away for a quick tea break and come back. Alright, sampling is done. Tonverk already assigned a cool name for this instrument, so I'll stick to it. Let's check where this instrument is saved. Hold Function and press the sampling button. We are looking at the SD card's content again, and it is in the User, Multi-Sampled Instruments folder. And here is the instrument. You will find 2 files here, one instrument file and one WAV file containing the entire recording. To load this instrument, exit the sample browser, select an audio track, hold Function and press Source to select the multiplayer machine. And the new instrument should be added to this list at the bottom. A tip here is to hold Function and press down as you scroll and you will jump in section. There's my instrument, I'll press Yes. Now I can play this sound as a polyphonic instrument on Tonverk. Add effects and so on. Alright, that's all for this video. Now you are a sampling expert on Tonverk.